I've got the swing arm from the 250 TS set up on the mill here. The swing arm bushes were not a good fit in the swing arm, and some attempt had been made to raise burrs on them to get them to fit better, but the one on the chain side had actually come loose, and as a result the housing is worn oval. The other side is still round, more or less. The bush wasn't particularly tight, but neither was it actually rattling around. So the plan is to bore it out a little bit oversized, and then to make a set of bronze bushes to go in. I've got a bit of bronze stock to replace the original cast iron bushes. So we've got an angle plate bolted down to the table and squared up, and then a couple of Eclipse V-blocks, and that's just a bit of 20mm plastic electrical conduit holding the two apart for setup. There's a homemade, a cut down homemade V-block at the bottom there. Don't know quite why someone cut it up. I mean, I know who made them. It was an old friend of mine. Had made them at school or college, I forget where. But those are clamping it up nicely. I've got a couple of clamps at the back there. I've just set some clamps here to stop any tendency for it to rotate. This end's free floating effectively. It's all just clamped up here, and I'll put the camera on the tripod and we'll just check that everything's appears to be square. Okay, as usual, the problem here is trying to get the tripod set up so it's not in the way. But got a coaxial indicator in the spindle, and I've got the table down pretty much as low as it goes, and I haven't got a riser block for this mill. But what I can do is drop the probe down before clamping it in. I get the flat in the right orientation, and we're bearing at the moment. I've got the travel in the y-axis, and if I traverse down, there's I think this was bored from both ends, and there's a little bit of a step in the surface in there, but getting a nice consistent reading over a decent amount of travel. And if I rotate the probe through 90 degrees, let's get that centered a little better, and we're still making good firm contact with the side. And again, we're not getting any movement. Now the sensitivity of this dial is much reduced by the length of the lever, but the angle plate should be square. I used a square to set the V-blocks vertical, and we're clamped down with the V-blocks, so I'm fairly confident that we've got a decent alignment, and the bushes will in any case be reamed to final size in situ, which should take out any final alignment issues, and may well be better than the original bore alignment, because often these were actually machined and then welded, and there was considerable distortion in the bores. Clearly not enough attention to detail was paid at the factory, and that's why the bushes were loose. So the next job we'll centre up. So I'm just going to sweep the probe by hand to make sure that we're not binding anywhere. So now the way the needle's flickering looks to be the surface finish in there more than any eccentricity. So I'll zero the X and Y on the DRO, lock the table. Okay, I've got the boring head set up, found the depth of the original shoulder in here and set the quill stop. I've run this out until we're just skimming. This isn't round, it's worn. We're pretty confident we're lined up on the bore down here, so we'll I've wound on a 10th thou cut, it being an imperial boring head. So I'm going to start off hand feeding it. Put a little bit of lubricant in here and see how it cuts. Okay, we seem to be cutting okay, so I've engaged the power feed. Okay, you can hear the cut increasing at the bottom there. That will be beyond where the original bush was pushed in, or something to do with the original machining. So I'm only going to go another 10th thou at this stage because I want to see how well this this arrangement's working. We're just about now getting a contact all the way around, so after this cut I'll take a measurement. Now that is actually on the 22.5. And we have just about cleaned up all the way around. There's a few areas right at the top that was barely skimming. So I'm going to have it's slightly warm. It's only slightly warm. So it's not going to have grown by much. I might take it out to 22.6. Don't want to take too much out of here. We obviously don't want to remove more metal than that's necessary because of the wanting to have decent wall thickness here. I can see various pock marks on the inside in a semi-regular pattern, so again there may have been an attempt at the factory to raise a bird to get the bushes to stick. So I just did not have enough rigidity on the original setup to bore this out. So I've had this vise sitting on the floor for a little while. It was part of my order from China, and it's an angle lock style vise, but I deliberately went for the CNC style rather than the usual type, which has a base with a coolant drip channel, and this has allowed me to mount it on its side like you do with the precision toolmakers vices, and you can see I've got it clamped down nice and firmly. It appears to be pretty square, at least square enough for this job, and has allowed me to get hold of the swing arm close to where I need to bore it with a set of they're a set of homemade V-blocks. I didn't make them, I inherited them off a friend. He'd made them at college and passed them on, and I've just got a little block at the bottom to space it up, and at the rear here it's not particularly clamped in place. It's just damping out the vibrations, because of course this end kind of acts like a tuning fork. So I've got a concentric indicator on there, and at the moment, and I've got very little knee travel left, so I had to put the stylus in there after I got it positioned. I haven't got enough height to get it up out of the bore, so at the moment it's pointing towards the front edge, and if I run it down, that's the step in the bore, and then essentially we've got no indicator movement. And if I then rotate the stylus 90 degrees, and then there's the step, and again we've essentially got no movement. So I'm fairly happy that the swing arm is mounted with the bore perpendicular to the table, and we'll obviously use the indicator to centre up on that centre section of the bore between the two actual bush recesses, and then with any luck I'll be able to bore this out and get a decent finish and a parallel bore, which I wasn't getting with the previous less rigid setup. Well, the bore is now at least round and parallel. You can see some of the pockets in the wall of the bore, which appear to be attempts to raise burrs to hold the original swing-on bushes in place. There's no point in weakening the arm by taking those out. I may in fact end up Loctiting the replacement bushes in. They're almost certainly going to be bronze. I've got some phosphor bronze bar of a suitable size in stock, but we got success this time. No vibration. I swapped one of these cheap brazed carbide boring bars rather than the high-speed steel one that I was using before, that I just could not get to cut evenly. There are some hard spots in there from the welds which were causing problems. Anyway, this will be a case of break down the setup and flip it over and do the other side, which probably won't. I'm not going to take it out to the same bore. I'm just going to clear it up on the other side, and then it'll be making a set of bushes and getting the bike back together. I think that's a nice clear shot of the bore on the other side of the swing arm, and you can see what a poor machining job was done originally, because what looks like a very coarse thread, that'll be the removal track of the boring tool, and we're just this side's probably going to end up cleaning out roughly the same size as the other side by the looks of it. Don't know if there are any. Yeah, that looks like a pop mark that's been put in there. That one too, you can see the little high spot. So yeah, not a good era for Moto Guzzi, but it'll all be sorted out. So another little update, the swing arm for the 250 TS, after it was successfully bored out, I went and made a set of bronze bushes and pressed them in, and then I had a 16mm reamer, so I was able to size them, and I've got a really nice tight but smooth fit on the swing arm spindle. However, I couldn't then get the swing arm into the frame because the side plates were too tight, and I'll swing down to the bike and we'll look at why. If you can see that hole over the far side, and the shiny area around it is the thrust face for one side of the swing arm, and that's a relatively thick steel plate over that side, and there is also a steel plate this side, and the one on this side is threaded. So when you put the swing arm spindle bolt through, it threads into the frame, and you're able to pull the two side plates together to take up the side play in the swing arm, and then just above it there is a bearing nut to lock it. Now, because the bush that was on the chain side had broken up because it was a loose fit in the swing arm, I think what had been happening is that the developing play, the previous owner had attempted to take up that play by adjusting the swing arm, because there's a little bit of corner rounding on the spindle, and the nut was a little bit chewed up, and that's about the only fastener on the bike that has the slightest hint of damage to it. So what in fact I did was to take this old pin and thread it into the frame, and then put spacers between the end and the plate the other side, and jack them back apart till the swing arm would just slip in. So that's pretty much all ready to go back together, other than the fact that the new pin sitting down there, just like the original one, is lacking a drilling for a lubrication feed. There is one shown in the handbook, or the parts manual, but clearly they hadn't fitted it, so there's no provision for adding any lubricant. So I shall either do that, or I shall adopt the technique of drilling the swing arm casing itself and putting grease nipple there, so that you just fill from the inside. That may actually be preferable to doing a small deep hole drilling in the high tensile bolt.